Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a second as people are popping on. I see the attendee list kind of populating. And I see on the attendee list that there are some people with duplicate names. This may have been because a team member forwarded you a Zoom link to attend. Because there may be questions asked of folks, if you could rename yourself, if your attendee name is not your actual name, that would be great. It makes identification of who to unmute a lot easier. And if it's you on two devices, that's fine. Oh, great. Okay. So I will pop up a PowerPoint and we can get started. Everyone see? Excellent. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our deliberation and selection meeting for the Shared Services Organization, which is part of our PCF's American Rescue Plan Act work. I'll kick us off with an agenda today. We'll do a quick process overview of what's gotten us to this meeting. We'll do committee member introductions and just a declaration of no conflict of interest. We'll have public comment for any items not on agenda, so any comments not related to the deliberations and selection of the Shared Services Organization. And we will also take public comment before deliberations begin, and then we'll wrap up. So the City of St. Pete contracted with Pinellas Community Foundation to administer some of its American Rescue Plan Act funding, which was the last COVID-19 economic stimulus bill passed in March 2021. There's kind of two parts to the PCF funding. One is to select a lead agency to operate social service hubs throughout St. Pete, like a centralized location to give the community what they're wanting and needing. The Well was chosen as that lead agency, and they have some partner organizations as well, Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services, as well as PERC. So the Well is working with those two agencies to put the hubs into action. Part two of that is the Shared Services Organization, which is going to provide direct services to St. Pete nonprofits to strengthen their infrastructure to improve service delivery. So the first clients of the SSO are going to be the Well and its partners. So strengthening that all their infrastructure to make the hubs more efficient. Services from the SSO will also be available to other St. Pete nonprofits. So up for selection and deliberation today is a $2.5 million allocation to put the Shared Services Organization into operation. So we accepted applications for this process from September to mid-October. We received two proposals that will be talked about today. And yesterday, on November 16th, the review committee, you see beside me on the screen, interviewed the two applicants, the leadership from those two applicants, to get more information on how they would provide services and to fill in some gaps from the applications. So now to introduce the committee, we'll go around in the list order that you see on the screen, and just to introduce yourselves and also say that you have no conflict of interest.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. My name is Darla Ote Murphy. I am the Executive Director at Girls Inc. of Pinellas and have the privilege of chairing this committee, and I have no conflict of interest.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Boucher, Executive Director of Nomad Studio, and I have no conflict of interest.
Good morning. I am Ellen McDonald, CEO at Florida Resurrection House, and I have no conflict of interest.
I'm Jennifer Yeagley, CEO, St. Pete Free Clinic, no conflict of interest.
Good morning. My name is Demetrius Taylor. I am the board treasurer for the Well, and I have no conflict of interest.
Hi, I'm Elisa Punzelin Randall. I'm the Managing Director for Communications and Community Engagement for the Mayor's Office, and I have no conflicts of interest.
And Jen, or
Jen Yeagley, CEO, St. Pete Free Clinic, no conflicts.
did you already go? Sorry. Okay. Anyway, I also want to state that that organizations and committee members may have had relationships with some of the applicants. However, PCF vetted that carefully and consulted with our legal counsel, and none of them constitute a conflict of interest. So no committee member received any benefit from the process today. Throughout the committee's deliberations, there's a Q&A portion, or an optional Q&A portion where committee members may ask questions of the applicants in attendance. This may or may not happen. It depends on how conversations amongst committee members go. If you are an applicant and a question is asked of you, you can raise your hand on Zoom, or if there are any phone participants, dial *9 and that'll raise your hand. The PCF team will unmute you and you'll have 3 minutes per question to answer. The 3 minutes is a hard limit. We will cut you off. That's just to remain fair to both the committee's time to deliberate and the other applicant. So Darla, I'm going to pass it over to you. We have our scores up on the screen. This is the initial scoring summary from the applications. This is not taking into consideration the questions and answers that were asked and answered yesterday through applicant interviews. So these scores are a starting point for discussions and deliberations and are not binding. So Darla, if you want to take it away and let me know when to stop screen sharing as well.
Okay, so thank you, David, and thank you, committee members and everyone else who is in attendance. As David shared, I will reiterate that what we see on the screen is a compilation of the scores that the committee members submitted. And while we have that shared score, our individual scores, as well as our individual comments on the applications, have not been shared. And so this morning is an opportunity for us to deliberate together and in hopes of combining the written application, the interview that we had yesterday, and then where our thoughts are and where we've landed this morning. And so that in this deliberation time is an opportunity for us to both share our thoughts, and if we've had some change of mind concerning the applicants, this is the opportunity to do and share that. And so if it's okay with the rest of the committee, I'd like to begin by asking us to share from the section that was called our comments, that kind of informed the decisions that we came up with and the total score that we gave the particular applicants. And so we'll begin with Catalyst, simply because that's the order on the screen. And I'll start by sharing my comments. Once I've shared my comments and the personal score that I gave to Catalyst, I invite the committee to share their comments, and so that we can kind of talk around those areas. And so if you're ready to begin, I'm ready to start with my comments. And so my comments began with an overview. I thought that the Catalyst Consulting Services grant proposal had clearly defined goals and outcomes, as well as the tools and strategies to support them. The proposal provided a concise yet comprehensive presentation of its objectives and their ability to carry them out. A few of the ways I think the proposal exemplified its readiness to carry out the RFP include: the proposal demonstrates a well thought out strategy to achieve the goals and outcomes of the RFP. It clearly describes the steps, activities, methods that will be employed to reach the desired impact. Moreover, Catalyst clearly demonstrated their long-term success in the local area, as well as the greater Tampa Bay region, in supporting nonprofits that specifically included the target audience of smaller and BIPOC nonprofits. Secondly, The proposals specifically outline the equipment, technology, and human resources necessary to carry out the project effectively. Next, the proposal's budget section is transparent and well-structured. It provides a clear breakdown of how the grant funds will be allocated, ensuring accountability and fiscal responsibility. Next, the proposal outlines a detailed plan for project evaluation and reporting. It explains how progress will be monitored, what data will be collected, and how the project success will be assessed against the defined goals and outcomes. Overall, the grant proposal was well-written, well-structured, and thoughtfully presented. And for this reason, I gave it personally a score of 91, and I highly recommended them without reservation. And at this time, maybe we can move in the same order that we did previously with our list of names, so that you can share your comments and what your recommendations were.
And just as a just for time's sake, just because we've seen the comments, they're quite extensive.
Okay.
We haven't, committee members have not seen each other's comments. So to kind of summarize and discuss, just because everyone read these applications very thoroughly, which we appreciate.
Okay.
And everyone's comments will be shared with the applicant, compiled. But just for time's sake, to keep moving, for people to pop in and discuss. And based on your comments, Darla, because since yours were thorough as well.
Thank you.
All right, the Cliff Notes version. The face flow was really clear. I thought it was a really strong proposal. It demonstrated capacity to support nonprofits. I thought that was really strong and evident. I thought there was some knowledge of St. Petersburg nonprofits. I know that Catalyst is on kind of like a national. They're local, but they're on a national scale. But I did see some knowledge of St. Petersburg nonprofits community. The budget was clear, and the narrative connected to the budget. There was a comprehensive understanding and communication of the infrastructure plan. And my only concern was the there was a range of that they've worked with nonprofits from $500,000 to multi-million-dollar nonprofits, and yesterday they clarified that it was $100,000. But I know that there are a lot of nonprofits with a $10,000 budget. So my only concern was like such a small scale. I think that was addressed yesterday with the answers that they had provided. My score was 84%, and I recommended, but with some reservations.
I think I'm up. So in agreement, a thorough, thoughtful proposal responsive to the questions asked. Catalyst has clear and demonstrated experience in the nonprofit sector. Budget was also clear and thorough, and a very responsive proposal. My concern is the requirement of the RFP makes explicit the desire for an organization with extensive knowledge of the St. Petersburg nonprofit community, and responding to needs specific to small grassroots local organizations. And implicit in that often is nonprofit organizations led by BIPOC leaders or leaders who otherwise are representative of traditionally underserved communities, and also clear experience providing services to culturally diverse nonprofits serving a culturally and racially diverse community. And I felt that the proposal lacked strong, clear, demonstrated linkages to that specific sector of the local nonprofit community. So for that reason, I did not recommend Catalyst to be the recipient of the grant funds.
Thank you.
I think maybe it's me. Hi. So, similarly, when reviewing the application of Catalyst, thought their attention to detail in their flow was wonderful. I felt really clear on what a nonprofit's flow would be with them. All of the things that were administrative in their application, I thought they were very clear and thorough. My main concerns were also the stated thing that $500,000 was considered a smaller nonprofit, and being a smaller nonprofit in the arena, I know many of the grassroots and small nonprofits in the area that would be deeply seeking these services would not consider that a small budget. They'd consider that pretty medium sized for themselves. So my main concerns on the application also had to do with their proposal not accurately or just well describing what it looked like for them to work with nonprofits that lacked the infrastructure, maybe to work inside of the flow. And so for that reason, I did recommend them, but with some reservations. Yesterday's discussions did outline that they've worked with nonprofits that are much smaller, but I do not feel that the discussions yesterday gave me enough understanding of how they would modify their process for me to change my recommendation, which is that I could recommend, but with some reservations. And I gave them an overall score of 79%.
Okay, so it's on me. So quickly, I just noted that the team does seem to have a lot of collective experience in this space. However, it just doesn't seem to be, most of it's not with culturally diverse nonprofits. I did recommend, but with some reservations, with a score of 78.
Thank you.
So I don't repeat some of the good words that everyone's already said. And mine is a compilation of what I recognize. And I had very brief comments on for both of the groups, but I'm trying to coalesce what they also presented in person. So I just want to touch on the marketing piece. I appreciated the very thorough description of how they shared how they would do some outreach in terms of who they would try to attract to be able to use the services. So I see no issue there. I know that I will fess up. I'm the one who asked the probably not so popular question at the very end of all of the questions that Darla mentioned. To Jen's point, just about and I took the approach more of, if you, Jen, as you usually do, you are much more articulate and thorough and elegant in how you say things, and so mine was more of a, so if who is representing the collective maybe doesn't look like it represents the community question. So I appreciated the answers that they provided. I did recommend them aside from that concern. So I will stop there so we can continue the conversation.
Okay. Did it look like everybody on the committee, had a chance to share? I wonder if we should talk around that a little bit, because it sounds like what we're hearing is we see that the organization is administratively highly qualified to carry out the work, but the biggest concern is twofold. Are smaller and thus probably less structured and ready, if you will, organization. And we talked about that yesterday, because I think what I heard from them was a stringent application process, and I'll call it an application process for lack of a better word, for organizations to get engaged with them. And that maybe some of these smaller organizations at the very outset would be weeded out from this wonderful skill set that this organization has. What are our thoughts around that?
I'll jump in, shockingly to everyone. I actually didn't necessarily take that away. I think that, again, and not to, we're talking about Catalyst specifically.
Right.
So they can deliver on the work that is stated in the proposal. And I feel like I heard from the responses yesterday that there is a commitment to understanding the landscape, learning and understanding the landscape of smaller nonprofits more. And meeting them where they are. So I do think that that was clarified in the answers to the questions provided yesterday. When we look at however, I just returned to and looking at the explicitly stated criteria of direct, stated, and current experience working with those small grassroots organizations that, again, as we know, are primarily led by folks of color in St. Petersburg, or could be, in terms of who is able to ramp up immediately with the local relationships, credibility, and capability to build rapport with those small organizations out of the gate. I think that's where, that's where the gulf is for me a little bit. So I do think that I heard a commitment to, I think that practically speaking, this is not the longest grant period. And in order to achieve the results that are required, who is best positioned to jump in and immediately understand the landscape and move it forward. And so I think that's where I would make that distinction a little bit.
And I would like to piggyback off of that. Similarly, I know that a lot of, and similar to what Ellen said, like being a small nonprofit, I know in the very beginning of, after the launch of a nonprofit, or sometimes not even the launch of a nonprofit, sometimes nonprofits just happen because they fill a need, and people are running them from their dining room tables, and they are still working a full-time job, and they've got a food pantry in their living room or something like that. So they may not even be accessing trainings from the Nonprofit Leadership Center, or they may not even know those resources exist. So I think that having a real presence in the community is important. People who know people who know people. So that to me, Catalyst, again, so strong administratively, really impressive in all of the ways. I think that though I didn't feel a really strong presence in St. Petersburg, especially South St. Pete, where the greatest need is. And I think that it really takes time. I think that like moving at the speed of trust, that takes time to develop those relationships. And, sometimes it takes years to develop those relationships. So I agree with Jennifer's point on that my concern is with the short period of time, and the time that it takes to develop relationships, that more work could be done sooner if the relationships were already there.
Thank you.
I'd like to just offer another way to look at this. So I feel like all of us probably started with doing, whether it was in a paid capacity or volunteer capacity, doing something in our dining room table and it blending in with our chicken dinner. And I know that many of these people in Catalyst have been there as well. And so I feel like, once this is the penalty that one receives when you look like a more polished shop, and you it's harder to say I'm of the people, from the people, grassroots, because we've gotten to this point. And help me understand. So I don't know if any PCF staff want to speak up for this part. The need is there. The smaller nonprofits are, and I completely understand the trust building and the relationships that need to be there. But for this kind of work and the need that needs to be served, not to say that trust is not the primary thing to get this started, because the needs already need to be served. So is that not to say it's implicit, but even if the trust wasn't there, wouldn't some of these nonprofits already be waiting with bated breath for this kind of offering? And so no matter who is leading the charge, there will still be that opportunity. So if someone could help me understand that piece.
Maybe Jocelyn or Duggan, either of you want to speak to that?
I was just gonna say, I think that there are nonprofits that are waiting for this, and part of that is that this has been talked about now, and so I think, and it's been talked about through different networks and different groups, and so there are organizations that are really waiting for this to come online. And I think the other part of it is, regardless of the applicant that's chosen, we've got PCF to walk alongside them. We will need everyone on this committee to walk alongside them and help, regardless of the applicant that you choose, because to do it right is going to take a great effort from the community, regardless.
Thank you for sharing that, Dugan. And I will add this. I think that it's important for us to have these discussions, again, regardless of the applicant chosen, simply because we need to be mindful of whichever applicant is chosen, where are the weak spots that need to be undergirded. Neither of them scored 100%, which means there are some weak spots. And so I think this is valuable in that sense, even if when we walk away from this, we end up choosing the applicant that received the highest score or the other. This discussion is important so that we're cognizant of the support that either of these applicants will need moving forward to carry out the work. Are there other items that we feel like we need to deliberate around regarding Catalyst? Or are we feeling like we've put everything on the table that we feel strongly about, or that we have some concerns about?
The only thing I would add is that I have zero doubts that they will deliver a very quality product to the nonprofits. I mean, no doubt on that. I would score them very, very high. And so I suppose whether they are our choice or not, what will be true maybe is which nonprofits are coming forward for the services naturally based on the, and so I do think there are tons of nonprofits in St. Petersburg right in that arena that they defined that are not over that $1 million mark, right? They're below, who desperately need these services and will be so excited. And I think Catalyst will deliver to those nonprofits really well, because that flow will work really well for them, right? We've got accountants in place to do some things, and maybe somebody in-house that can execute some marketing. So I do think to what Duggan shared is there are nonprofits in the area, no matter who we choose, that are going to fit really well and be served really well. And so, I think there is something to say for considering which nonprofits will get most thorough use out of these services, right? When I think about some of the other organizations in the area that serve nonprofits, like Nonprofit Leadership Center, a lot of their programs do have some specifications you have to meet before you can engage in some of the programming, because they say this is when our research shows you're ready. And so I do think, to Elitza's point, this is a very polished group who has some knowledge of working with nonprofits. And it might be that what their expertise is telling them is nonprofits need to meet certain specifications before they're ready for some of the work. And I think that's a fair thing to say. The greater question for me just remains, what was the point of this money for these ARPA dollars? Who did they want to be served by the ARPA dollars? And that's, frankly, to the group, that's what's going to make the decision for me, is what were these specific dollars earmarked for, and who will serve that category best.
And I'm just going to pop in with procedural thing. We have a raised hand, but no question has been posed. We'll take comments before a motion is made. So as deliberations wrap up, we'll take public comment. But no one from the attendees will be unmuted until a question is asked or until public comment, just to clarify.
Thank you, David. It sounds like as a committee, we have completed this part of deliberation. What would our next steps be, David?
If you wanted to discuss the other applicant and your kind of collective impressions based on the interviews yesterday and their application kind of together, don't have to break apart the two as you discuss.
Okay. All right. And so based on David's instruction and the thorough discussion that we had around Catalyst, I think we are ready to move on and discuss our next applicant. And pardon me, although I heard it several times yesterday, I hope I put the A in the right position. Hypatia.
It's Hypatia. I think we we all messed it up before.
So it's not a long A, it's a short A.
Yeah,
Collaborative. And so we'll move on in our discussion of them. I'll again follow David's instructions and not read through my comprehensive comments, but just kind of give an overview of them. And my impression of the Hypatia Collaborative was the first thing that stood out in the reading of their application and also came across in their interview time yesterday is that they are passionate and have strong goodwill behind their project. Additionally, they're right there in South St. Petersburg. The areas where I had concern was that there were critical areas in the written application as well as yesterday that lacked the kind of clarity and structure that would be needed for them to hit the ground running. And so when we talked about Catalyst, we talked about the time frame to build relationships, trust, etc. And when I looked at the Hypatia Collaborative, as well as the interview that we had yesterday, I felt like they needed time to develop a stronger, structured approach to the work that they proposed to do. I think that because they had the component of being in the community, being a part, an integral part of the community, and also the passion and goodwill that led them, I think a further structuring of their plan and development of their plan would have put them in a better position now, but will certainly put them in a better position moving forward. And so I did not recommend them for the ARPA dollars, and I gave them an overall score of 44.
I think I'm next on this. So in the evaluation of their written responses, I actually did find their responses to be structured and thorough. I thought they provided a blend of both quantitative and qualitative responses to the evaluation pieces. I thought their budget was clear. Their marketing was clear. I thought their response to challenges indicated an understanding of the local community, but also their own challenges and how they would have been responsive to experiencing challenges as an organization. Their budget narrative could have been more detailed. So I did think that that was less thorough than what I would have liked to see. I appreciated their inclusion of the assessment that they were going to provide for nonprofits because it provided a little bit more clarity into their approach. In terms of their responses to questions yesterday, I'm just going to name this. Eliza alluded to it. They are less polished than Catalyst. I think that, their answers were thorough and strong. They are a less polished organization. They themselves come across as a more grassroots organization themselves. I don't have hesitation in their capability to deliver on what is asked of them through this proposal. But I think the way that perhaps they're communicating that and or, again, just their polish is different. I don't necessarily see that as a deficiency so much as a representation of the type of, perhaps nonprofit that they would be representing in this process. I just want to indicate too here that representation matters. And while I firmly appreciate the comments yesterday made about, often elements of diversity are not visible, there's lots of intersectionality in diversity. I've done this work, I appreciate that. And when we're working in community, representation and visual diversity is a factor in terms of not just trust building, but I think it was alluded to yesterday, just the lived experience of racially diverse communities and how to best support and represent them. And so I did think that this Hypatia was stronger in terms of their representation of the communities that have been indicated to be served through this proposal. And those of you who know me know that I am often the outlier voice in the room that says, perhaps we go with the smaller, less polished, more grassroots approach to move the needle on equity forward. And I say that as a leader of an organization that is not in any way grassroots and that is large and that does, if we're going to compare it, is much more like Catalyst than Hypatia. So just, I want to, name all of those things. But if equity is a consideration, representation is important, and interrogating perhaps those inherent biases around leaning toward organizations that are more polished, have had more opportunity, and perhaps a longer, more thorough track record. I would just, that came up for me. So if we're looking to move the needle with small grassroots, primarily BIPOC-led organizations, the representation piece is important. So I recommended Hypatia to be the recipient of the grant.
I thought their application was clear. I really appreciated the nonprofit needs assessment in there, thorough, reading through all of that. I thought that was really helpful to get an idea of what a nonprofit would be completing from the start. They are deeply knowledgeable about the smaller grassroots organizations specific to St. Petersburg. I also appreciated their answer about talking with funders and asking funders, is there an organization that you really wanted to fund, but they just didn't have, they didn't pass that, that they just didn't measure up in that way. So I appreciate the understanding of those kinds of barriers and challenges to smaller nonprofits. I also really appreciated the community accountability board, having a community accountability board involved in the assessment and the evaluation. I appreciated that. I like the idea of the cohort data and 990 as part of the evaluation. I thought that some of the anticipated expenses seemed low, and a more thorough budget narrative would have helped with that. But overall, I echo so much of what Jennifer had to say about representation. And as a nonprofit who, we know as nonprofits that we often have to consider donor and funder intent with the funding that is coming into us. And if it's explicitly stated deep knowledge of small BIPOC-led nonprofits in South St. Pete, not just the idea that there are small nonprofits in South St. Pete, but a deep knowledge and on a personal level, and a history of that, I thought was really important. And again, moving the needle on equity, I echo that. So really similar takeaways. I recommended them with some reservations around capacity area, the administrative capacity area. But overall, I thought it was a strong proposal.
I think I go after Carrie. So I think that my responses to this one were almost in reverse from the last one. My concerns with this one were administrative. Simply like Carrie, I thought the budget was not quite accounting for maybe some unexpecteds. Yesterday, when I was hearing some of the ideas of marketing, it didn't really go along for me with having deep connections to the community already. So why, the direct mail pieces didn't make tons of sense to me, although I understand a long and wide approach. But when it came to experience in working with small, diverse nonprofits in South St. Petersburg, I scored them very high in every one of those arenas because it was clear not only that they have a knowledge base of it, but that their approach would be very team-like towards a smaller nonprofit, and that there would be a sense of, I think like Jen kind of said, like we're in it together type environment. And so I do think their ability, one of the things that I thought I really liked that I heard yesterday, I was a little concerned about the vendor network because collaboratives can be really, really strong and also really hard to navigate. And my one concern, there was a question yesterday that was mine that had been posed, which was, what's it going to be looking like to navigate through all of your vendors? Is the small nonprofit going to be expected to do all of the phone calling here, there, and everywhere? And I think they answered that well. And one of the things that I really liked the response to yesterday was that the nonprofits are going to have an opportunity to have their own informed consent on which vendors serve them. That they were going to be presented with all of the options in the arena, and that they would have some choice themselves on who would feel like a good fit for them. So that was something for me that really pushed the application even a little more forward yesterday, is knowing that the nonprofits would have some area to speak for themselves in that process, along with hearing that they were going to have one kind of coach, or they named it a couple different ways yesterday, but that one person that would help them navigate the whole vendor network and what that would look like was also something that answered some of my questions about how are we going to navigate through this collaborative. So my questions about administration were kind of answered yesterday, although I do think on a short timeline that there's some bumps that perhaps will be having to be dealt with in the beginning. And also just hearing a little bit more, hearing that the database could be used a lot of different ways by nonprofits, like all of the things that were named yesterday, those are all such specialized things. My nonprofit uses a CRM, like we use all of these different databases, and to hear that one database could serve all needs left me a little questioning. But that's not the main stated need of this this original proposal. And so I'm okay with that question being answered right now for myself. And so I did score them as recommend, but with some reservations because of just the need to understand the budget and navigating the vendor network. But because of yesterday's answers, I do feel better about navigating the vendor network.
Okay. With regard to the written application, I did put, I believe that more information could have been provided with regard to assessing individual needs, and as well as the timeline could have been a bit more developed. But with our conversation yesterday, more information was provided that makes me feel better about this group. And I did recommend them, but with some reservations, with a score of 72%.
Lisa, did we hear from you?
I don't want to offer
Okay.
anything that's already been said. In a nutshell, I scored them a little bit lower than Catalyst. All of you have voiced somewhat similar reservations or support that I have. I've struggled a little bit with some of the responses yesterday. So I'm not sure if all the questions that we had as a collaborative of our committee were answered in the time that we had, but I scored this group just a little bit lower than I did Catalyst.
All right, I think before I give an overview of what I believe that we are hearing and sharing, I wanted to add one more thought from my personal perspective, and that was, I'm sorry, somebody was in my office. When we put questions in front of this group, it appeared as though some of the processes and procedures were still being thought through, if you will. They were kind of considering, maybe we'll do this, or we think we may try that, etc. And I say only that to say, and now I'm going to step back. That was my personal input. I think that what I hear us saying as a group, and in culminating what our united voice is saying, is that we all feel extremely strongly about this group's, not only their commitment to the specific area and people that this grant was designed to target, but also their work with them, the work they've been a part of this community and doing the work within this community. But we have some reservations about their administrative capacity right now, not their administrative capacity long-term, because it seems that they could develop it, but are they ready right now, I think is what I hear us saying. As we move through this process and consider, the other thing that comes to mind is also twofold. This fund was designed to benefit the smaller and BIPOC nonprofit community. I don't know that I want us to mix that with the organization that is given these funds to carry that out, right? And so while I think it would be great that the organization that is going to lead or be the SSO would be also BIPOC and already embedded in the South St. Petersburg community, if the beneficiaries are going to be the primary targets that this grant intended, I think is where our thought process should be. But I wanted to really hear everybody else's feedback with regard to that, to see if we're in that same mindset.
So one of the other things that I noticed and was kind of taken into consideration was the benefit of the St. Petersburg community as a whole. And when looking at the former applicant and looking at their vendor network, a lot of those people are community members of St. Petersburg. So I thought that that would be an additional benefit to our community, as well as the nonprofits that are being served.
Are we speaking of Hypatia? Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments around that area? Okay. All right, David, you want to
Sure.
lead the next step?
I do want to interject with just a slight comment that ramp up time is built in to this process. That's not to your comments are, it's the decision of the committee. The logistics of this include a ramp up time. So that's just for you all to know. But can definitely consider the administrative and community connections parts of each application. We will take public comment before you all kind of go to a motion. So we have a raised hand. And do we have a time, keep it read, like timer set? Great, okay. So this is the time for anyone to make public comment around these deliberations. Michelle, I'm gonna unmute you to go ahead and speak.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to everybody for your comments. It's always great to get constructive criticism, feedback. It helps you grow. I just wanted to, I guess, have a point of clarification. I'm glad Jocelyn and Rose are on the call because they've been great in every conversation we had in preparing. I think it's important to note, and we can always follow up with more documentation. I understand a decision's made today, but I think that this is important to state that in the initial application, when you all defined cultural diversity, it was including Black and Hispanics. So what I'm hearing in some of the comments is derivative of just people of color. I will share that that was something we actually inquired about in our calls with Jocelyn and Rose early on. We actually tackled that question. So I want to kind of bridge that gap, that we did have thoughtful conversation around that, but I want to also make sure that the original intent in the application and what was laid out was for Black and Hispanic residents. And so if there was a need, although we did provide our client list, and I'm sorry that we didn't answer that question to the extent that it garnered, I guess, clarity. So did want to just clarify when we sort of regrouped after yesterday, and even if it wasn't clear in our client list, that if we're talking about of just color, we have 18% of our clients. They're not all in St. Pete, that's correct, that we are dealing with leaders of color. So I wanted to clarify that. I also just wanted to clarify that in terms of budgets under $100,000, which clearly we did not outline or articulate that to your specifications, but we do have 20% of our clients are under budgets of $100,000. So again, just wanted to give those points of clarification and apologize it wasn't more clear. But I do think moving forward, clarifying if it was just to look at areas of color, there was also Hispanic residents considered in the application, and it's laid out clearly in terms of the criteria. And that's why we were responded. So I just want to give those numbers. And if it is requested by the committee to speak specifically to that, we can provide that of color in those statistics I gave if there's a feeling that you need that information. So just wanted that opportunity to provide some points of clarification. Thank you.
Okay, we have Lindsay Grove next.
Hey everyone, I just want to say thank you so much for considering both applications. I know that doing grant reviews is a arduous process, and I'm sure this hasn't been easy. So and the feedback is actually really great for us. I really appreciate that feedback. It's something that we can definitely take back and figure out how we can improve upon this model. And I kind of in the same vein, I want to make sure that yes, Hypatia is a new organization, but it is backed by organizations that have a long track record of not only providing nonprofit support, but that do have administrative capacity to support Hypatia as it starts to ramp up. We understand that this is an experiment. This is a pilot, and there's going to be some adaptations and some areas where we might say, hey, that worked, and hey, that didn't work. So I'm just hoping that I'm really glad that at least our passion and our community connections and trust really came through in our application, because we really believe that the best way to do the work is making sure that it is community centered, and sometimes that is bumpy, and sometimes it does require a little bit of grace in figuring figuring it out as we go. I mean, one of the things we continually say about this particular project is that we're kind of building the airplane while we're flying it. So I just hope that that is sort of given some consideration, because we are doing something brand new in the hopes that this will become a model for other communities. And that's really all I had to say. Thank you all so much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So we are getting close to the hour we had scheduled. If everyone is okay with going over, does committee members, are you able to for 10 to 15 minutes?
Okay.
Great. Okay, I'll hand it back over to Darla to kind of bring everyone to a consensus and decision.
Okay, so we really are here now, guys. I'll one more time reiterate what I think that I hear us saying as a group, and then David, if the process is to be by a show of hands, let us know, or any other fashion in which we will make this final decision. And so I think what I hear us saying in general, that as it relates to catalysts, our areas of reservation really relate to their lack of being embedded in the community, and their growth opportunity for including more smaller and BIPOC nonprofit. And when it, but their strength area, of course, being administrative, where they could hit the ground running, and to that end have greater and more efficient impact, and possibly on a greater number of nonprofits in that area to stabilize them and get them moving where they need to go. As it relates to Catalyst, it looks like what we're seeing is their strong commitment and entrenchment in the community that this grant was designed to serve, and their partnerships that are already within that community as well. Where we're seeing the area for challenge and opportunities for growth is along that administrative continuum. Their process seems to be in process. And to reiterate what David added, as a reminder for us as we come to a decision, that there is some time that is built in for organizations to kind of ramp up and prepare before they begin the actual work that they are proposing. If there's any final comments or something that I've missed in going over a synopsis of what the committee's collective thoughts are, please feel free to share that now. And then David, please let us know the procedure moving forward for landing.
Typically, we would entertain, someone would propose a motion. We would look for a second, and then discussion, kind of like a board meeting. Rules of order.
Gotcha. Okay, and so
May I jump in and ask a question as well? Or just clarifying question for the committee. Appreciate everybody's comments. When we look at the aggregated scores for both proposals, Catalyst was 81, Hypatia was 77, is that correct? And based on, the discussion we've had here today and comments, it sounds like people are coming away with, in general, the same landing spot for when we originally scored those applications, even after the interviews yesterday, which suggests to me that the positioning of Catalyst remains slightly ahead of that of Hypatia. And I wanted to just ask that clarification of the committee prior to the motion process, if anybody's comfortable weighing in on that.
So I would agree with that, Jennifer. I think that we have landed at the same place where we originally started, but I think with a little more understanding of the position of where both organizations are. And I think taking the opportunity to hear them out has been helpful both for them and for us. But yes, I would in general agree with you that we're kind of at the same spot for different reasons. Anybody else? And so, David, would this first motion be a motion to actually carry out the vote?
Duncan, could I lean on you for rules of order?
Yeah, so you could, anyone from the committee can make a motion of who you want to see, and we'll see if it gets a second, and then you can deliberate.
I just want to make sure I'm clear, David. I'm sorry, Dugan. That must be interesting with two Ds in the office. Should we now make a motion to vote on who should win the grant, or should we make a motion based on the numbers that we already see and move forward with that one in particular?
Based on all the information that you have been able to ascertain, application and the interview, anyone can make a motion as to the candidate they would like to see carry this process forward.
Got it. Got it. I've been doing most of the talking, so I'm going to turn my mic off for just a moment so that anyone can feel who feels the need to can make that first motion. Maybe I need to turn my mic back on. Okay, no problem. So I would like to make a motion to recommend Catalyst for the ARPA grant dollars.
Is there a second from anybody? All right. Then anyone got a motion for the other one?
I am considering the numbers. I do understand that there's only 5 of us, and because they were only 4 points separate, that's not a statistical. Statistically, that's not a large spread. Based on everything I heard today, I am making a motion that Hypatia, hope I said that right, be the winners of this grant.
Is there a second for that? All right. Do we need to
Second.
deliberate more? Oh, go ahead. Oh, Demetrius, is that a second for that?
Yes, I was trying to get off mute.
Thank you. So then is there discussion from the committee around that? Anybody want to chime in before a vote is taken?
Yeah, only insofar I really would like to hear a little more than from maybe Ellen, since Ellen made the recommendation, in terms of how the work is going to be carried. Well, here's my concern. There are many small nonprofits in the community that, if given clear directives, guidance, setting up strategic plans, their budgets, getting their boards together, really getting their feet on the ground and solidifying, that would benefit quickly, I think, with the guidance of Catalyst. Talk to me about how you envision that happen and what I may be missing insofar as Hypatia's capacity to do that and to do it now. I think I'm directing this maybe to Ellen. Ellen, since you made the motion to recommend Hypatia.
Or I'm sorry, I thought you had said the opposite, that you didn't. You were waiting to not hear from somebody else. So I'm happy to start the discussion. So my concern about their abilities were never to deliver the service, because reading through the individual vendors, they have a lot of experience. So for example, if my nonprofit needs help with marketing, looking at the vendor list that they provided of who I might choose to help me with nonprofit marketing or accounting or any of those things, the individual vendors on the list, I think that their bios and resumes gave me enough information that I needed to know the service will be strong. My concerns were related to how will the vendor network work as a whole. And so my answer to you is two-part. The vendor network as a whole, I believe, needs time to ramp up, which when David offered to us that this grant does have time allocated for them to become a more cohesive unit. I believe that becoming a more cohesive unit as a vendor network is something that can happen in a relatively short amount of time, easier than trying to build relationships in the community. So for that reason, I believe that their services will be good because the vendors that they proposed were strong. But I agree with you, Darla, that they will definitely need to use that ramp up time very strategically. And as we talked earlier, as a committee here, it will be our job to walk alongside that our recommendation is a strong one. So that's what I have to offer. I don't know if anybody else would like to join me.
In their application under the needs section, it seems that they are self-aware of that as well, asking for time to build their infrastructure in that way. So I don't think it's something that probably is surprising them to hear, and they have covered that in the needs section. I just have an additional comment about their responses continue to return to the idea of community and building community. And one of the things that that struck me was this vision that I had for them looking at the whole community and kind of creating it felt to me that their clients who they will be working with will also be working with each other. And I think that's definitely a great way to bring up the whole community. A rising tide lifts all boats, rather than, and I not that Catalyst didn't include this, but I didn't get that feeling from Catalyst that it would not only be serving clients, but also serving a client body as a community. And I appreciated that, that aspect of the application, building community.
So I think we had a motion for Hypatia on the table, but not a second.
There was a second.
Oh, we had a second from
Demetrius.
Oh, we did
Demetrius.
have a second. We did have a second. Okay,
And so that was discussion.
gotcha. Any further discussions? Okay, David, next steps for us.
Would be a vote.
Okay. All righty. So I guess we can do it by hands.
Mhm.
So, all right, all in favor of Hypatia winning the grant ARPA dollars, please show that forth by raising your hand. 2, 3, 4. It looks like 4, and that would be the majority. Is that all we need, the majority?
We
Yes.
record no's and abstentions.
Oh, okay. All righty.
So yays and nays and abstentions.
Got it. So it looks like we have 4 yays, and then any nays to Hypatia receiving the grant dollars. Please show that forth by raising your hand. And that looks like 2. And so there would be no, that was all yays and nays, and I think that accounted for everyone. And so
The motion carries. Oh, sorry, you were about to say that.
Oh, no, you are fine. You are fine. By majority, the vote carries, and the grant dollars will be given to the Hypatia Collaborative.
Excellent. So I can talk about next steps briefly for the selected provider. I'll pop up a slide on the screen. So we'll get in touch with Hypatia later today with the next steps email. Do not, these are large capital letters, start spending or providing services under this contract. This is, we are going to enter into contracting, so please do not begin spending and do not bring on any more vendors. Under this contract, there is a really intensive conflict of interest process to ensure no conflict. And so that will need to be carried out first before anyone new to this besides the proposed vendor network is brought on. And there will be a conflict of interest disclosure process as this progresses. So don't mean to sound too stern, but really that is very important to understand and to respect. And I want to thank the committee for truly all their work. This was intense deliberation and thorough. And again, as I stated yesterday after the interviews, you all really realize the importance of this project. So thank you for honoring that and being a part of it. And thank you to the applicant for all the time and dedication you put into this as well. I don't know if any of my team members have any closing words or anything. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time, and we will talk to you all soon. Great. Thank you. Take care.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.